Karol Mason is known to all of us as now the Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Justice Programs. Before that, the Deputy Associate Attorney General in the Justice Department under Eric Holder and President Obama. And she oversees the agencies that help us think about our work, advance good practice, do research, collect good data, all of the important agencies that have been so integral to the advances that we've seen. But I want to just highlight one particular aspect of Karol's leadership that is relevant to this moment, and it follows the death of young Trayvon Martin. And if you recall that moment, our President Obama, and our Attorney General, Eric Holder, both spoke eloquently about the need for a different approach to issues of race and racial understanding and relations between police and communities of color. And it was, the story not told is that it was Karol who heeded our president and her Attorney General and said that she would organize an effort within the Justice Department to take some of those ideas and advance them in a significant way. And so it's a personal honor for me to recognize her today, because it's through that effort that the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice was born, announced at the Ford Foundation in April 2 years ago, and now located here at John Jay in partnership with the Center for Policing Equity and Phil Goff at UCLA, Tracy Mears and Tom Tyler at Yale Law School, and our colleagues at the Urban Institute. So we're doing the work. We're doing that work in 6 cities around the country. We think this work actually is the bellwether for the future, and we have very high hopes for all of our success in those 6 cities, but none of that would have been possible had it not been for Karol Mason. So please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Assistant Attorney General Karol Mason.
Good morning. And I like to know that you're actually there. So, because as far as I'm concerned, I'm with my people. Because you all get this. You all are the reason why I do this work. So thank you very much, Jeremy, for the introduction. I am pleased to be here at John Jay College, one of the premier institutions for generating criminal justice knowledge. But I'm really particularly happy to be here because with people who are committed to this work. And I still remember that day in April when I made sure that I could sit where I could see David and Jeremy and Tracy's faces when we announced that we were going to pull this initiative together. And as Ron Davis in the COPS office likes to say, I twisted a lot of arms to pull this money together, and so I'm counting on you all to deliver. And I know you will. So I'm delighted to be in the company of so many esteemed researchers and practitioners, so many innovators and leaders, people like Jeremy Travis, Commissioner Bratton, and David Kennedy, who have made the safety of our communities their life's work. It's a privilege to be here with all of you. And I'm proud to bring greetings and thanks from our Attorney General, our new Attorney General Lynch, who not only values the critical work that each of you is doing, but depends on your commitment to reducing crime, improving fairness, and strengthening relationships between communities and those who serve and protect them. She and all of the Department of Justice are grateful for the clarity you are bringing to the President's vision of a safer, more just, and equitable society. We know that the approaches you are taking through the National Network for Safe Communities, and I'm so glad that I got to see the video before speaking to you all, so that you all are all energized and really remembering why you're here and what we're here to do. And you're having a very real and very profound impact on the health and integrity of America's cities. The focused deterrence model on which your efforts are based has proven to be among the most promising strategies for targeting and reducing crime in our most violent cities. The 2 exemplars of this model are Operation Ceasefire in Boston and the High Point Drug Market Intervention in North Carolina. That's home to me as well, so I'm really proud of the work. Who's from North Carolina here? There you go. Good. Congratulations. Great work. But this is effective because it's evidence-based. And both of these models, how many of you all know about crimesolutions.gov? Oh, good, that's not great, but it's good. It's better than in some audiences. But these programs are rated effective in our evidence-based database, which is crimesolutions.gov. And effective is a superior rating because it means that it's the programs have been assessed and the strength of their success in reducing crime has been demonstrated by research and evidence. The impressive evaluation results in these cities are a testament to the power of pulling levers, building predictability to the crime-fighting enterprise, bringing predictability to the crime-fighting enterprise, and airing what David Kennedy calls the moral voice of the community. I'm proud of the role that the Office of Justice Programs has played in supporting many like-minded efforts over the years. Back in the late 1990s, as Jeremy mentioned, it's hard to believe that's so far in the past. To me, it still seems like current history. But while Jeremy led our National Institute of Justice, OJP helped carry the focused deterrence model to a number of cities through the Strategic Approaches to Community Safety Initiative, which partnered federal and local agencies and was among the first federal programs to marry research and enforcement. So Jeremy is really the forebearer of the model that we use now, which is evidence-based approaches to dealing with the issues you deal with. Because we want to make sure that we know that you've got limited financial resources, limited people resources, and we want to make sure that the things that you do are soundly based in evidence so that you know that they work. We've also helped widen the lens by supporting a broader philosophy of swift, certain, and proportionate sanctions that ensures credibility and fairness with the threat of punishment. It is this idea of efficient and effective enforcement sustained by moral authority that represents the greatest promise of turning around our most violent communities and ending our wasteful and harmful over-reliance on incarceration. We continue to look for ways to leverage this promising model of crime fighting. Last September, the National Network was represented at the launch of the department's Violence Reduction Network. VRN, as we affectionately call it, coordinates resources from across the department, bringing together U.S. attorneys' offices and our law enforcement units, the FBI, DEA, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals, in making training, technical assistance, and informational resources available from OJP, the Office of Justice Programs, the COPS Office, and the Office on Violence Against Women. What we wanted to do, thanks to Kristen Mahoney, who was one of you all at one point before she joined the alphabet soup that Jeremy talked about, she wanted to figure out how do we better deliver resources to your communities to help you deal with these problems. And we did something that nobody thought could happen. We brought together the FBI, ATF, DEA, Marshals, U.S. attorneys, and the grant components to partner with you all. And how many of you all are VRN cities here? I know that some of them are here. And these folks that have their hands up, meet with them and talk to them while you're here, and I guarantee they'll tell you that this is a different kind of partnership, that this is a different Justice Department that's helping to work with you all in your communities. Can I get an amen out there? All right, good. And we hope that we are testing this again to find out, is what we're doing a better way of giving you the resources that you need? We're targeting cities with violent crime rates that that are well above the national average, and we're concentrating resources on the most pressing violence problems at each site. Most of the sites are represented here today, even though all of them didn't raise their hand. I know they're here. VRN has been in operation less than a year, but we're already beginning to see substantial progress. The President highlighted some of these accomplishments last month when he visited Camden, New Jersey, one of the 5 current VRN sites, and we intend to announce new ones at the end of September. The Camden County Police and their partners are doing outstanding work. For example, after a peer exchange with their counterparts in Philadelphia, they began a call-in program rooted in focused deterrence aimed at juveniles. This has gotten enthusiastic support from the community and the families of these youth. Another innovative facet of the Camden effort is the DIVERT program, which stands for Digital Imaging Video Retrieval Teams. These teams, which were trained by the FBI, gather surveillance videos from crime scenes, review and edit them, and send them to TV stations and social media channels, essentially creating crime commercials that can be used to help identify suspects. The cities are working with a single-minded focus on ensuring fairness in their enforcement efforts. At our site in Oakland and Richmond County, officers received training on fair and impartial policing from Lori Friedel, a national expert on racially biased law enforcement, and we held a webinar on community engagement in high crime areas. We co-sponsored a separate event on police legitimacy in the Northern District of California's U.S. Attorney's Office that was remarkably attended by every police chief in the jurisdiction, every district attorney. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And the wonderful thing about this work is I now see lots of friends in the audience who have been part of this work, and some of them were in the video. So I look forward to this continuing partnership. Through our Bureau of Justice Assistance National Training and Technical Assistance Center, we affectionately call that NTAC, and learning a new vocabulary, and I'm trying not to use initials and to make sure that I communicate the resources, the rich amount of resources we have available at the department. We supported a seminar called TACT, Tactics and Trust, which builds on the latest scientific research on how to effectively engage with community members and quickly build rapport and trust. And the Chief Assistant District Attorney in Alameda County, Kevin Dunleavy, has started a group in his office to review cases to make sure that prosecution decisions are made fairly and without bias. And I hope that you hear that when we talk about this work, it's about the criminal justice system. It's not about police. It's not just about the community. It's about the full system, and we've got to have reforms across the system. And as David has said repeatedly in meetings with law enforcement has been one of the courageous leaders in self-examination and looking at how they can improve themselves. So we thank you for the work that you and law enforcement are always willing to do and step up and look at yourself and see how you can improve. And we need you to be that model for the rest of the criminal justice system so they can do that self-reflection and self-examination as well and figure out how they can change to improve relationships with communities as well. Our aim through the Violence Reduction Network is not to sweep through these neighborhoods, round up suspects, and take them away. Our goal is to help build cities with something positive and lasting by enlisting the community and law enforcement as co-producers of public safety. As everyone here knows, arrest and the threat of arrest will not carry the day. What will carry the day is our ability to cultivate faith in the good intentions of our justice system, the entire system. That faith, as we all know, has been tested. In some places, it has been broken. I believe that nowhere is this fractured faith beyond repair, because you're all here. That's why I know it's not beyond repair, because with your commitment and your hard work, we are going to fix this. As Chief Bratton said, it's not an if, it's a when. That faith, as we all know, has been tested, but we are doing the right things here to make sure that we are going to succeed. The script follows a tired formula, one that we can trace back to Watts, Harlem, Detroit. Some of you aren't young enough or aren't old enough, rather, to remember that, but I do. And that it was those scenes on TV which inspired me to want to be able to do this work. And so the scenes are all too familiar of widespread unrest precipitated by a single violent encounter. As the frustration mounts, we worry over what the outcome will be and what the next flashpoint will be. We can't afford reckless optimism, but we do need to be optimistic. But neither can we afford pessimism. Too many of you have invested far too much in turning your communities around and been successful at it. As President Obama said in Selma earlier this year, action requires that we shed our cynicism, for when it comes to the pursuit of justice, we can afford neither complacency nor despair. And by your presence here, I know that you have chosen to really act and make sure that we continue to bring about sustainable change in our communities. And action in this case begins by confronting some very difficult realities. The reality of stark inequalities in our justice system, the reality of families and communities riven by victimization and imprisonment, the reality of young men who choose often against their own instincts to live in opposition to the values that they've been taught, and not least, the reality of a long and troubled history of racial antagonism in our country. James Baldwin wrote about growing up on the streets of Harlem. The moral barriers that I had supposed to exist between me and the dangers of a criminal career, he said, were so tenuous as to be nearly non-existent. I certainly could not discover any principled reason for not becoming a criminal. If we believe, as I do, that this attitude remains contemporary among too many of our young men, that in pockets of America the choice between crime and not crime seems a false one, then our first responsibility is to make sure that there are legitimate opportunities for a meaningful path to achievement and success for these young men. I hope some of you all saw the editorial in the New York Times about the impact of young people who feel disconnected from our communities. Our president understands the urgency of this issue, which is why last year he launched My Brother's Keeper to give every young person who is willing to work hard and play by the rules the chance to reach his or her potential. How many of you saw the documentary last night, Rise, or streamed it? If you haven't seen it, go find it. It's a documentary that was produced by the Discovery Channel and it showed on the OWN network and it's been streaming. But it's a documentary that shows the exceptional work that happens when we let our young men and boys of color know that we believe in them. And one of the messages that we ought to get from that documentary is that not that these young men and boys are extraordinary, they are exceptional if we give them the opportunity. So I encourage you to see that video and understand why the work you do is so important. And as they say, to begin to see these young men and boys of color as not at risk, but at promise, because that's what they are. They're our future leaders. Across the federal government, agencies are working together to give the kids advantages that many of them had never had and to help them succeed. Private foundations have answered the president's call by announcing independent commitments. The new My Brother's Keeper Alliance, a consortium of private sector organizations, will support evidence-based interventions aimed at tackling achievement challenges from cradle to career. The Justice Department and the Office of Justice Programs in particular is playing a central role in this effort by supporting programs aimed at preventing youth violence, ensuring that young people are treated fairly by the justice system, connecting them with positive influences, and keeping them in school and out of our courts. One of our biggest challenges is nurturing respect for the law for those who enforce it. One might ask, and one should ask, why is faith in the rule of law at such a low ebb? It's not because young people delight in committing crimes and relish disorder. It's not that they don't care about their own and others' safety. To echo David again, nobody wants to live in chaos and violence that we see too often on our inner city streets. The problem is that in some neighborhoods, the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they served is one of mutual mistrust and suspicion. The blame for this cannot and should not be laid at the feet of today's law enforcement professionals, the vast majority of whom operate out of goodwill and a sincere desire to make a positive difference. But the frustration simmering in these communities is very real, and it gets us nowhere when we try to ignore it or deny it. The fact is, we all grieve over the lost lives of citizens and our law enforcement officers, and we all deplore the wanton violence and destruction that we've seen in Ferguson, Baltimore, and elsewhere. There is far more that we agree on than that we disagree on. But there are differences in the experience and perspective, and we must find a way to work through these differences. We also must frankly be willing to acknowledge and confront the damage that has been caused by a history of misunderstanding, a history that has played out in the unequal and sometimes abusive treatment of minority groups on the one side and in bold hostility toward law enforcement on the other. When the president said that this nation's racial history casts its long shadow upon us, he was talking specifically about our criminal justice system, and notice I said the whole system. Until we are willing to deal with our troubled national past and accept that our justice system is implicated, we will not get very far in not bridging, but closing the divides of trust in our communities. I see this issue of racial reconciliation, of building trust in our criminal justice system and those it serves as one of the defining social issues of our time. And I will tell you that, as people hear me say frequently, I have an expiration date in 2017. But I am committed, because of you guys, to making sure that we make a sustained difference in this issue. It is the defining moment of our time, and I know that you all are able of meeting this issue and tackling it. In my view, however, how we handle this moment will determine whether we are able to turn the corner and begin a new path towards civic harmony and understanding. That's why I've made this work a top priority of the Office of Justice Programs, and it's why the Attorney General has identified it as one of her foremost goals. We're fortunate this work is already underway in your communities, and we can be encouraged by research showing the tremendous public safety value of trust building. What we know from experience and from study is that fairness and effectiveness in the enforcement of the law are not mutually exclusive. They are tightly bound together. Analysis of procedural justice has shown that those who come in contact with the police and other justice system agencies are more likely to accept the decisions by authority and obey the law in the future if they feel that they have been treated fairly, even when they are penalized by criminal sanctions. And the communities of which they are part will actively encourage respect for the law. This means that if we make a sincere effort to strengthen connections between law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve, we can hope to reverse the pattern of distrust and discord that have become too much a part of our nation's civic narrative. We can do this by ensuring fairness in the administration of the law, by working to eliminate bias in our systems of justice, and by addressing past wrongs and historic grievances. John Jay College is the lead partner in a major effort, as Jeremy mentioned, being led by my office in cooperation with the Office for Victims of, the Office on Violence Against Women. I know B. Hansen is here somewhere. Also with the COPS office and others across the department. It's called the National Initiative on Building Community Trust and Justice, and its goal is to expand our base of knowledge about what works to improve procedural justice, reduce racial bias, and promote racial reconciliation. As Jeremy mentioned, Yale Law School, UCLA Center for Policing and Equity, and you're going to hear from Phil shortly, and the Urban Institute are also part of this effort. And with an advisory board of law enforcement practitioners and community and faith-based leaders, they're bringing their considerable expertise to the task of repairing fractured relationships between citizens and justice systems. The project is tackling a number of issues, from the strained relationships between minority communities and law enforcement, to the interactions between police and domestic violence and sexual assault victims, to addressing the concerns of the LGBTQ community. Currently, as they mentioned, 6 cities are serving as demonstration sites to test strategies and determine what works best to build trust. And you'll be hearing more about that tomorrow. I'll be joining the Attorney General in Birmingham on Wednesday, Chief. And I was checking the schedule to make sure you were going to be back in Birmingham. I know you will be. But we're going to be spending the day in Birmingham as part of her community policing tour. We've also launched an online resource center with news about the city's efforts and research and other information about procedural justice, implicit bias, and racial reconciliation. And I encourage you to visit the site at trustandjustice.org, trustandjustice.org. And I want to make sure that I recognize Catherine Darkschmidt. I know she's in here somewhere. Where are you, Catherine? Stand up. She hates this, but too bad. It's one of the privileges. So Catherine is nominally one of my policy advisors, but Catherine is the brains behind the national initiative and the force behind the national initiative, and I am comfortable that it will be in good hands when my expiration date arrives because of her leadership and her passion for this work. So thank you, Catherine. I believe this effort represents a major step forward in resolving historic tensions in many of America's communities. Through it, we will build on pioneering work being done in some of the nation's most challenged areas, and we will open doors to cooperation and trust that will lead to safer communities and a justice system that inspires the confidence of all it serves. I'm under no illusion that this work will be easy, or that we will be able to reach all of our goals within the 3-year scope we envision for the project. But what I am counting on each of you to do is to sustain this work, whether there's Justice Department funding or not, to sustain this work because our communities depend on this. So I want to hear from you all. Who's going to pledge with me that we're going to stay in this work until we can't do it anymore? So, thank you.